The Galactic Broadcasting Network's most popular show, Apex Predators Across the Galaxy, had been running for over 300 cycles. Zephyrian host Kexthal prided himself on featuring the most dangerous creatures from across known space. His 4 eyes gleamed with excitement as he adjusted his biosuit, preparing for what he believed would be another routine episode. Today, we venture to a recently discovered world called Earth. Kexthal announced to his audience of billions across 17 different star systems. The locals call themselves humans, and they claim to be the apex predators of their planet. Our research team has identified what appears to be their most fearsome warrior caste. The camera drones followed Kexthal as he approached a reinforced viewing chamber. Inside, a single human male sat calmly on a simple chair. The creature appeared unremarkable at first glance. No visible claws, no armored hide, no venomous fangs. Just pale skin, short brown hair, and clothing that seemed more decorative than protective. "Behold, specimen designation Marcus Chen," Kexthal continued, his translator making his clicking sounds comprehensible to the universal audience. "Age 28 cycles by their measurement. According to our files, this human served in something called the Marine Corps and participated in multiple conflicts on their homeworld. The production crew had done their homework. They'd captured Marcus during what humans called shore leave, stunning him with neural dampeners before he could resist. Standard procedure for the show required specimens to be conscious, but contained within unbreakable quantum glass barriers." Kexthal gestured to his assistant, a crystalline being from the Nexus Collective. "Veltar, please activate the standard predator response test. Let's see what this human is truly capable of." The chamber began to shift. Holographic projections created the illusion of Marcus's natural habitat, based on extensive research of human military engagements. Desert terrain materialized around him, complete with the scent markers and temperature readings from a place called Afghanistan. Marcus blinked slowly, his head clearing from the stunning effects. He found himself in familiar surroundings, but something felt wrong. The horizon shimmered strangely, and there was an odd quality to the light that his trained senses immediately recognized as artificial. "Interesting," Kexthal observed, noting how quickly the human had assessed his situation. "The specimen shows immediate environmental awareness. Most predators require several time units to orient themselves after neural dampening." Marcus stood carefully, his movements economical and purposeful. 23 years of military training had taught him to conserve energy until he understood his situation fully. He noticed the transparent barrier surrounding him and the alien creatures observing from beyond. His expression remained neutral, but those who knew humans well might have recognized the dangerous calm in his eyes. The show's format was well established. First, they would observe natural behavior patterns. Then they would introduce stress factors to trigger predatory responses. Finally, they would present the specimen with prey animals to demonstrate hunting techniques. It had worked flawlessly with creatures from hundreds of worlds. "Note how the specimen appears completely relaxed despite obvious containment," Kexthal narrated. "This suggests either exceptional stupidity or remarkable emotional control. Let us proceed to phase 2 of our evaluation." Hidden projectors began creating the illusion of threats. Predatory animals from Marcus's homeworld materialized as holograms, snarling and circling him. The sound system reproduced their calls with perfect clarity. Most specimens would either cower in fear or immediately display aggressive postures. Marcus simply turned his head slowly, tracking each projected threat with the methodical precision of someone who had survived multiple combat deployments. He didn't flinch when a holographic lion roared directly in his face. He didn't react when phantom wolves circled him with bared fangs. "Remarkable," Veltar whispered, her crystalline body chiming softly with excitement. The stress indicators show elevated awareness, but no panic response. This species appears to have exceptional threat assessment capabilities. What the alien hosts couldn't understand was that Marcus had immediately recognized the projections as artificial. The subtle pixel distortion, the lack of proper scent markers, the way light didn't interact correctly with the holographic fur. His enhanced situational awareness, honed by years of identifying real threats in hostile environments, had cataloged every detail. Perhaps the specimen requires a more direct stimulus, Kexthal suggested, activating the next phase. Deploy the standard fear induction protocol. The chamber filled with sounds designed to trigger primal fear responses. Screaming, explosions, the calls of dying creatures. The temperature dropped rapidly while strobe lights created a disorienting effect. This combination had never failed to break down a specimen's emotional defenses. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, and something shifted in his posture. The aliens, focused on their instruments and readings, missed the subtle change. But anyone familiar with human combat veterans would have recognized it immediately. Marcus wasn't being broken down by their fear tactics. He was being reminded of who he was. The sounds of combat brought back memories of brotherhood, of missions accomplished against impossible odds, of watching over sleeping villages, knowing that his presence meant children could sleep safely. The aliens had expected to trigger his prey instincts. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. When Marcus opened his eyes again, they held a quality that made Veltar step back from her monitoring station. There was no fear there, no confusion. Only the cold, calculating gaze of someone who had made peace with violence a long time ago and was now deciding how to apply it. Fascinating neural activity, Kexthal announced to his audience, completely misreading the situation. The human appears to be entering what we might call a combat state. Notice how the physical posture has changed, becoming more compact and efficient. Marcus began to move differently. Gone was the casual stance of someone waking up confused. Now he moved like water, flowing from position to position, as he examined every surface of his prison. His fingers traced the quantum glass barrier with the systematic thoroughness of someone conducting a tactical assessment. The alien audience across the galaxy watched with growing interest as their entertainment began to take an unexpected turn. They had seen countless predators rage against their containment, wearing themselves out in futile displays of aggression. This human was doing something entirely different. He was thinking. The specimen appears to be analyzing its containment, Veltar reported, a note of uncertainty creeping into her musical voice. This level of strategic assessment is unprecedented among the lower species we've featured. Marcus completed his circuit of the chamber, having memorized every detail of the barrier's construction, the location of every monitoring device, and the position of every alien observer beyond the glass. He returned to the center of the chamber and sat down again, but now his relaxed posture was clearly calculated rather than natural. Is the human attempting communication? Kexthal asked, noticing how Marcus seemed to be looking directly at him despite the one-way nature of the quantum glass. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had just figured out how to turn a disadvantage into a weapon and who was looking forward to the opportunity to demonstrate the lesson. The aliens, lacking the cultural context to interpret human facial expressions correctly, completely misread the gesture. "Excellent!" Kexthal exclaimed. "The specimen is showing what appears to be a submission response. This suggests higher intelligence than initially estimated. Perhaps this human recognizes our technological superiority and is attempting to negotiate." The truth was far more dangerous. Marcus had spent the last several minutes analyzing not just his prison, but his captors. He had noted their body language, their obvious confidence, their casual dismissal of his capabilities. Most importantly, he had recognized the setup for what it was, a show designed to demonstrate his species' inferiority for the entertainment of others. 23 years in the Corps had taught Marcus many things. But perhaps the most important was this. When someone wanted to make an example of you, the best response was to make an example of them instead. The neural dampeners had worn off completely now. Marcus could feel his full strength returning, along with all the enhanced reflexes and combat conditioning that had made him one of the most effective warriors his species had ever produced. The aliens had made their first crucial mistake by underestimating human physiology. Their second mistake was assuming that entertainment value would protect them from the consequences of their actions. Marcus stood again, and this time, there was no mistaking his intent. Every movement radiated controlled lethality. The audience watching across the galaxy began to sense that something was different about this episode, though they couldn't quite identify what. "Veltar," Kexthal said, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty for the first time. "Are you certain the containment field is operating at full capacity?" Before she could answer, Marcus moved, not toward the barrier, not in the random thrashing of a panicked animal, but with the precise, economical motion of someone executing a plan he had been formulating since the moment he woke up. The show was about to become far more educational than anyone had intended. The alien audience, scattered across 17 star systems, leaned forward in anticipation. They had no idea they were about to witness the beginning of a legend that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed the seemingly primitive species from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. Marcus Chen, United States Marine Corps, was about to remind the universe of a very important lesson. There was a difference between being civilized and being harmless. And humanity had never been harmless. Marcus didn't attack the barrier. Instead, he did something that made every xenobiologist in the galaxy suddenly pay very close attention to their screens. He began to sing. The song was old, passed down through generations of warriors from a dozen different human cultures. The Marines had adopted it unofficially, and veterans recognized it immediately as both a promise and a warning. But to the aliens monitoring his vital signs, it appeared to be some sort of pre-combat ritual. "Fascinating," Kexthal whispered into his microphone, though his voice carried a tremor that his audience didn't miss. "The human appears to be engaging in some form of psychological preparation. Note the rhythmic breathing pattern and the sustained vocal tones." What Marcus was actually doing was far more sophisticated. The song served multiple purposes. First, it helped regulate his breathing and heart rate, optimizing his body chemistry for sustained combat. Second, the vibrations allowed him to test the acoustic properties of his prison, gathering data about the barrier's construction. Most importantly, it was sending a message to any humans who might be monitoring the broadcast. The message was simple. Marcus Chen was not broken, not defeated, and definitely not entertainment. As the song continued, something unprecedented began happening across the galaxy. Human communications networks, previously thought to be primitive and localized, suddenly came alive with activity. The song was being recognized, translated, and transmitted across faster-than-light channels that the galactic community hadn't even known existed. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister, watched the broadcast in the Joint Command Center that had been hastily established when they detected alien signals. Her face remained perfectly composed as she turned to address the assembled representatives of every major human military force. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said calmly, "they just made this personal." Back on the alien vessel, Marcus finished his song and smiled again. This time, even Kexthal could recognize the predatory nature of the expression. The human's eyes held no fear, no confusion, only the patient confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. "Veltar," Kexthal said urgently, "are you detecting any unusual energy signatures from the specimen?" The crystalline being's harmonics shifted to frequencies associated with anxiety among her species. Host Kexthal, I'm reading massive coordinated communications bursts across this system. The pattern suggests some form of fleet movement. The truth was even more alarming than Veltar suspected. The moment Marcus had been identified on the broadcast, every human military installation in the solar system had shifted to highest alert. The species that had seemed so primitive suddenly demonstrated coordination capabilities that made the most advanced galactic civilizations look amateur by comparison. Marcus didn't need to escape his prison. Help was already on the way. The first sign of trouble came from the navigation officer, an insectoid creature whose compound eyes could process vast amounts of data simultaneously. "Ship's master," it chittered nervously. "I'm detecting anomalous readings on the approach vectors. Multiple contacts moving at velocities that exceed our database parameters for this system's native technology." Kexthal tried to maintain his professional composure, but sweat analogs were beginning to seep through his biosuit. "How many contacts?" 67 ships confirmed, with more emerging from what appears to be cloaked positions throughout the system. "Ship's master, their acceleration curves suggest propulsion systems significantly more advanced than our initial assessments indicated." The camera drones continued recording automatically, broadcasting the unfolding crisis to billions of viewers who had tuned in for simple entertainment. What they got instead was front-row seats to a paradigm shift that would redefine galactic politics. Marcus stood quietly in his cell, occasionally glancing at his captors with what could only be described as polite concern. He appeared to be listening to something, though the aliens detected no communications entering the chamber. What they couldn't understand was that 23 years of military service had given Marcus the ability to read a tactical situation from the smallest environmental cues. The subtle vibrations in the deck plating told him about the ship's course corrections. The barely perceptible changes in artificial gravity indicated acceleration and deceleration patterns consistent with evasive maneuvering. The shift in his captor's behavior spoke of growing panic among the crew. Most telling of all was the way the ship's defensive systems were powering up. Marcus could hear the high-frequency whine of charging energy weapons and the deeper rumble of shield generators spinning up to full capacity. His captors were preparing for a fight. "Host Kexthal," the navigation officer reported, its voice climbing several octaves in distress. "The human vessels are requesting communication. They're broadcasting on frequencies we didn't know they possessed, using encryption protocols that our computers are having difficulty parsing." "Put it through," Kexthal ordered, though his confidence was rapidly evaporating. The main screen flickered to life, showing the command bridge of what was clearly a warship. The human female in the center chair wore a uniform that spoke of high rank and hard-won authority. Her resemblance to the specimen in the chamber was unmistakable. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge with deadly calm. "You are currently holding my brother against his will. I strongly recommend you return him immediately." Kexthal struggled to maintain his composure. "Admiral, surely you understand that your relative volunteered for this cultural exchange program. We are simply demonstrating the diversity of galactic life forms to our audience." Sarah's smile was every bit as dangerous as her brother's had been. "That's an interesting interpretation of kidnapping, Host Kexthal. I notice you know my brother's name, his service record, and his personal details. Curious level of knowledge for a random cultural exchange." The truth was, the show's research team had been extremely thorough. They'd monitored Earth communications for months, identifying what they believed to be the most effective human warriors. Marcus had been selected specifically because his military record indicated exceptional capabilities. What they hadn't counted on was humanity's pack-bonding instincts or their unwillingness to abandon their own. Perhaps, Sarah continued, you'd like to know what we've learned about your show during our own research. Did you realize that 67% of your featured species are now extinct? Curious coincidence, wouldn't you say? The galactic audience watching the broadcast began to understand that they might be witnessing something far more significant than entertainment. The implications of what the human admiral was suggesting sent ripples of unease through civilizations across the galaxy. Marcus, still standing calmly in his cell, began to stretch. Not the random movements of someone trying to stay limber, but the systematic preparation routine of a warrior getting ready for action. He rolled his shoulders, flexed his fingers, and shifted his weight from foot to foot in a pattern that any human military observer would recognize immediately. Admiral Chen, Kexthal said, his voice steadying as he fell back on diplomatic protocols. Surely we can reach some accommodation. The Galactic Broadcasting Network is prepared to offer substantial compensation for your cooperation in this matter. Host Kexthal, Sarah replied, and her tone carried the kind of finality that made smart people start looking for exit routes. You have exactly 10 minutes to return my brother unharmed to his original location on Earth. If you fail to comply, I will interpret your actions as an act of war against humanity. War? Kexthal's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in what his species used to indicate confusion. Admiral, surely you understand the relative scales involved here. The Galactic Broadcasting Network commands the resources of 17 star systems. Your species hasn't even achieved reliable interstellar travel according to our surveys. Sarah's laugh was not a pleasant sound. Host Kexthal, I think your surveys might have missed a few details. Marcus, are you ready? In his cell, Marcus nodded once, sharply. Then he did something that made every alien scientist in the galaxy suddenly realize that their understanding of human capabilities was dangerously incomplete. He disappeared, not in the sense of becoming invisible or teleporting to another location. Marcus simply moved faster than the alien monitoring equipment could track. One moment he was standing in the center of the chamber, the next he was examining the quantum glass barrier with his bare hands, his movements a blur of precisely controlled motion. The barrier, designed to contain creatures with strength measured in tons and energy output capable of leveling city blocks, began to show stress fractures under Marcus's touch, but he wasn't using brute force. Instead, he was applying pressure at specific points, using knowledge of materials science and structural engineering that shouldn't have been possible for a primitive species. How is this possible? Veltar whispered, her crystalline body resonating with harmonics of pure terror. The containment field should be absolutely impermeable to any creature below Class 7 strength ratings. Marcus paused in his work to look directly at her through the barrier. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the supposedly soundproof material, suggesting that human understanding of acoustic principles was considerably more advanced than anyone had suspected. Ma'am, he said politely, you seem to have confused primitive with peaceful. That's a dangerous mistake to make about any apex predator. The quantum glass barrier shattered like ordinary window pane. As alarms began screaming throughout the ship and security forces scrambled to respond, Marcus stepped calmly out of his prison. He was no longer the captured specimen they had thought to use for entertainment. He was a United States Marine in hostile territory, and he had a job to do. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had earned its place at the top of Earth's food chain, and why declaring yourself humanity's superior was the fastest way to prove yourself wrong. The broadcast continued, carrying the unfolding crisis to billions of viewers who were beginning to understand that their entire conception of galactic hierarchy was about to change forever. Marcus stepped through the shattered remains of what had been considered unbreakable containment, and the ship's security systems immediately went into full alert. Blast doors began sealing throughout the vessel while automated weapons systems tracked toward his position. The aliens had prepared for the possibility of specimen escape, but their preparations were based on creatures that relied on brute force and rage. They weren't prepared for a human who approached combat like a chess match played at light speed. Marcus moved through the ship's corridors with the fluid efficiency of someone who had studied the vessel's layout during his captivity. Every security camera, every automated turret, every blast door had been mapped and cataloged. What the aliens saw as random wandering during his transport had actually been reconnaissance. The first security team to encounter him consisted of 4 heavily armed Krillian shock troops, each standing nearly 3 meters tall and armed with energy weapons capable of punching through tank armor. They found Marcus standing calmly in an intersection, hands raised in apparent surrender. "Specimen will return to containment immediately," the squad leader growled, its translation matrix making its threat universally understandable. "Resistance will result in termination." Marcus nodded agreeably. "I understand completely. Just one quick question, though." The security team exchanged glances, confused by the human's reasonable tone. Their confusion lasted exactly as long as it took Marcus to close the distance between them and demonstrate why human beings had earned the nickname persistence hunters among the more informed members of the galactic community. The engagement lasted 4 seconds. When it was over, 4 Krillian shock troops were unconscious. Their weapons had been field-stripped and disabled, and Marcus had acquired a detailed working knowledge of alien body armor systems. He left them alive but thoroughly restrained using their own equipment, along with a note written in Universal Trade Script. "Thank you for the gear. Will return when possible. Monsieur Chen, USMC." The broadcast continued throughout the ship, and billions of viewers across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as their understanding of human capabilities underwent rapid revision. The creature they had dismissed as entertainment was moving through one of the most advanced vessels in known space like he owned it. In the command center, Kexthal was rapidly discovering that being the host of the galaxy's most popular show didn't prepare you for actual combat situations. "Security Chief, report. Where is the specimen now?" "Host Kexthal, we have lost contact with Teams 7 through 12. The human appears to be moving toward the primary communication array. Should I deploy the combat drones?" Before Kexthal could answer, every screen on the ship flickered and displayed the same image. Marcus, now wearing appropriated alien equipment, sitting in what was clearly the ship's primary communications center. Behind him, sophisticated alien technology sparked and smoked in ways that suggested extensive but precise sabotage. "Good evening, Galaxy," Marcus said, his voice now being broadcast directly through the show's own network to 17 star systems. "My name is Marcus Chen, and I'd like to take a moment to clear up some misconceptions about my species." On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen smiled for the first time since her brother's disappearance. The fleet she commanded had used the delay to move into optimal positions, and every human military installation in the solar system was now operating at maximum readiness. But more importantly, Marcus had just done something that would change humanity's position in galactic politics forever. He had seized control of the galaxy's largest communication network. "I know many of you have been watching this broadcast for entertainment," Marcus continued, his tone conversational despite the chaos erupting throughout the ship around him. "You've been told that humans are primitive, weak, suitable only for observation and study. I'm here to provide some additional information." In the background, the sound of security forces trying unsuccessfully to breach the communication center's defenses provided a soundtrack to his words. Marcus had used his brief access to the ship's systems to implement security protocols that were keeping even the vessel's own crew locked out. "First," Marcus said, examining an alien energy weapon with professional interest, "you should know that the individual who captured me made a significant tactical error. See, humans don't just form social bonds. We form what our anthropologists call pack hunting groups, and when you threaten one member of the pack, right on cue, the ship shuddered as Admiral Chen's fleet opened fire. Not to destroy, Marcus noted with approval, but to disable specific systems with surgical precision. His sister had always been the smart one in the family. You get the attention of the entire pack, Marcus concluded. Now, I notice there's been some discussion about whether humans qualify as apex predators. I'd like to address that directly. Marcus stood and moved to a section of the communications center where the ship's database was accessible. Within moments, he had called up the show's complete records of featured species. The data appeared on screens throughout the ship and across the broadcasting network. This show has featured creatures from over 400 worlds, Marcus said, his tone taking on the quality of a professor delivering a lecture. Of those 400 worlds, 267 no longer support intelligent life. Now, I'm not a statistician, but that seems like a significant correlation. The implications hit the galactic audience like a physical blow. They had been watching systematic genocide disguised as entertainment. But here's the interesting part, Marcus continued, highlighting specific data points on the display. In every single case, the species featured on this show were apex predators on their homeworlds, strong, fast, dangerous, the kind of creatures that other species would naturally fear and want to see contained or eliminated. Across the galaxy, entire civilizations began to understand that they had been manipulated into supporting the destruction of any species that might threaten galactic hierarchy. The Galactic Broadcasting Network hadn't been providing entertainment. They had been providing a service for the established powers. Now, as for humans being apex predators, Marcus said, turning back to face the camera directly, let me clarify something. We're not apex predators because we're the strongest or the fastest. We're apex predators because we're the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most cooperative. But most importantly, Marcus paused, listening to something in his earpiece. Admiral Chen's voice came through clearly, informing him that the ship was now completely surrounded and disabled. Most importantly, Marcus continued with a smile that made several alien species immediately begin revising their diplomatic strategies regarding Earth. We're apex predators because we never fight alone. The ship shuddered again as human boarding parties breached the hull simultaneously at 17 different points. The aliens finally understood why human military doctrine placed such emphasis on coordination and mutual support. Every human on every boarding team knew exactly where every other human was and what they were doing. Marcus began shutting down the communication center systems, but not before leaving one final message for the galactic audience. To any species watching this broadcast who might be considering humanity as a target for entertainment or exploitation, I want you to remember something very important. You just watched one human, alone and unprepared, take control of your most advanced vessel, using nothing but basic infantry tactics and equipment scavenged from your own security forces. The ship's lights flickered as human technical specialists took control of primary systems throughout the vessel. Marcus could hear the distinctive sounds of professional soldiers moving through corridors with perfect coordination and overwhelming efficiency. Now imagine what we can do when we're properly motivated and working together, Marcus concluded. Oh, and one more thing. Host Kex Thal, you and your production team are now under arrest for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit genocide. The evidence has been forwarded to every civilized government in the galaxy. As human Marines appeared in the communication center's doorway, Marcus stood and straightened his borrowed alien equipment. The rescue had taken exactly 47 minutes from initial contact to successful completion. It would have been faster, but Admiral Chen had wanted to make sure the galaxy got a complete demonstration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said to the Marines, "it's good to see friendly faces." The senior Marine, a woman whose rank insignia indicated decades of combat experience, smiled. Welcome back to the world of the living, Devil Dog. The Admiral wants you to know that your little broadcast just got picked up by every major news network in known space. You're officially famous. Marcus considered this information. Good famous or bad famous? Depends on your perspective. Half the galaxy now thinks humans are the most dangerous species in known space. The other half wants to hire us as security consultants. Through the ship's communication system, Admiral Chen's voice reached every corner of the vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. This vessel is now under human authority. All alien crew members will be treated according to the standards of the Geneva Convention as adapted for interstellar law. Medical teams are standing by for anyone requiring assistance. The professionalism and restraint demonstrated by the human forces sent another clear message to the galactic community. Humanity wasn't interested in conquest or domination. They simply refused to be victimized. Over the following days, the broadcast of Marcus's escape would be analyzed by military strategists across 17 star systems. The combination of individual capability, team coordination, technological adaptation, and strategic thinking displayed by human forces redefined galactic military doctrine. But perhaps the most significant impact was on the Galactic Broadcasting Network itself. Within a week of the incident, over 200 species had filed formal complaints about the show's practices. Investigations revealed systematic manipulation of public opinion designed to justify the elimination of potentially threatening species. The network was disbanded, its leadership faced trial for crimes against sentience, and their vast communication infrastructure was placed under joint administration by a council that included Earth as a founding member. Marcus returned to Earth to find himself promoted, decorated, and assigned to the newly created Interstellar Relations Division. His first official act was to establish protocols ensuring that no human would ever again be subjected to involuntary cultural exchange. His second act was to send a message to every species in the galaxy that had ever been featured on apex predators across the galaxy. The message was simple. You are not alone. If you survived, we will find you. If you need help, we will provide it. And if someone is hunting you for entertainment, they will answer to us. The galaxy discovered that humanity's definition of pack bonding extended far beyond their own species. Any creature that had been victimized by the galactic power structure could count on human support. It was the beginning of what historians would later call the Great Realignment, as the galaxy's artificial hierarchy gave way to something resembling actual justice. And at the center of it all was the simple truth that Marcus Chen had demonstrated to billions of witnesses. Humanity had never been harmless. They had simply been choosing to be civilized. But when civilization failed to protect the innocent, humans were perfectly capable of reverting to what they had always been, the most dangerous predators their world had ever produced. The galaxy was a safer place for the innocent because of it, and a much more dangerous place for those who preyed upon them.